Hello, my dear YouTube family. Welcome back to another session. So, this session is under the playlist Soft Skills. So, today's session is about the different communication style and identifying my communication style. So, this comes under the Soft Skills playlist, and it's very important topic in the soft skills that I'm going to talk about. So, what comes to your mind when I say the word communication? Communication is nothing but the bridge between the information, right? Communication must be two ways. If the bridge breaks, communication doesn't pass between two persons. That's how the miscommunication comes in place. When miscommunication happens, the information that has to be passed from one person to another person gets wrong and it will be understood by something else, right? That is what miscommunication happen is. Somewhere or the other, communication is the most important thing in the language that acts as a bridge between the two individuals. If some or the other way, if the bridge breaks, if the miscommunication happens, the information doesn't pass, right? So on that way, there are hundreds of types of communication you can see in this world. So among that, I have chosen four major communication styles that are important in my perception that needs to be told. The four different types of communications are: first one is passive communication, the second one is aggressive communication, and the third one is reflective communication, and the fourth one is assertive communication. Let me tell you one by one what those means, and I'll elaborate in the video, and I will give you my story insights, how my transformational phases occurred in my 25 years of life, how I have transformed the different types of communication life styles in the different phases of my life that I'm going to cover. So let me talk about the first communication style, that is a passive communication style. So in this type of communication style, the individual is not much expressive about his or her opinion. He tries to be an introvert. He doesn't express his opinions towards the other. He will feel shy. That is what passive communication is. So he will agree to everything and he will hesitate and he will feel shy towards talking, and he will be very silent. So that's what my life started. I was an introvert. I was hesitating to express my opinions to others. That's how it started. I used to feel pathetic when this happens to me. No. So this is what passive style of communication. Somewhere in the world, somewhere or the other, this passive communication comes help. It will be helpful when according to the situation. So that's what passive communication is. In some situation, you need to be passive communicator. That suits the best communication style in some situation. So this is what passive communication is. So next, coming to the second communication style, that is aggressive type of communication style. What is aggressive type of communication style? Here, the individual tends to tends to overload his opinions. He thinks that his opinions are superior to others. He doesn't value the opposite person's opinion. That is what aggressive type of communication comes into the picture. So the individual tends to dominate over other opinions. He tends to dominate over the other opinions, and he tends to think that his opinion is superior no matter what. He will not keep the fact aside. He will not think in terms of fact. And sometimes this aggressive communication is very helpful in so many situations. You should be an aggressive communicator in that particular situation. to resolve the situation. Sometimes life requires this style of communication. I will tell you how I became from passive to aggressive. So I used to feel pathetic when I was a passive communicator, and I decided in my life that I want to adopt this style of communication, that is aggressive style of communication. When I adopted this style of communication, it gave me so much confidence in that I can do anything. So I like, to be honest, I like that authoritative communication style. I want to be authoritative. When I took the leadership role in my engineering, I used to be very aggressive communicator. So that helped me a lot to boost my self confidence. And also it gave me so much confidence to speak with others with no hesitation, with confidence, that I can express my opinions. So this helped me a lot when I tried to adopt this style of communication, aggressive communication. It helped me a lot during my college days. When time passed suddenly, slowly in my phase of life, what happens is this aggressive communication, there was a very major drawback when I had adopted this type of communication style. So what happens is it tries to bring in the ego inside you, and you don't think in terms of fact. When you adopt this style of communication, you don't think in terms of fact, and you tend to hurt other feelings also when you adopt this communication style. So there was a moment when I wanted to make a decision that I want to change my style, communication style, from aggressive to something else. Then the communication style that comes into my mind is the reflective style of communication. What is reflective style of communication, my dear friends? The reflective type of communication is the type of communication where your curiosity builds. You tend to ask more questions, and you think so many times, you think so much, that before speaking anything, you think in terms of fact. You will analyze it before speaking. That is what drawback I faced when I adopted the aggressive style of communication. I didn't used to think. I used to make really fast decisions. That is not healthier. I tend to be very urgent when I adopted this style of communication, the aggressive style of communication. So that was a major drawback in the aggressive style of communication. When I switched over from aggressive style of communication to reflective type of communication, my curiosity builded. I tend to develop my reasoning ability. There is so much difference between learning and reasoning. Learning you will do in your perspective, and you think that it is right in your perspective. Reasoning is different. Reasoning is you have to give the reason, keeping the fact, keeping the world's fact. You have to give the reasons. That's what the difference between the learning and reasoning is, right? Not always a good learner is a good reasoner, but a good reasoner is always a good learner, because he has the ability to reason, to give his opinion with a reasoning ability, with keeping the facts aside. And this comes when you try to speak more about the sensitive topics and the debatable topics. This reflective type of communication comes into hand. And also one more curiosity that develops when you adopt this kind of communication is you tend to ask more questions. When I adopted this reflective type of communication, I tend to ask more questions. My curiosity builds, my knowledge builds because of the questions. I didn't try. I wasn't agreeing on the first go. I used to think on the first principle why it is like this, why it is called like this. You know. So that is what made me, the reflective communication gave me more confidence and more reasoning ability. I wasn't agreeing on blindly on something, right? When I was an aggressive communicator, I blindly believed something, and I was thinking that my opinions are superior. I didn't used to think on next perspective, other perspective. That's what the drawback was on the aggressive type of communication. When I adopted this reflective type of communication, it was very useful in my office days. I tend to ask more questions. Knowledge builds, and slowly the life progressed, and the phases of my life progressed, and there was a time where this reflective type of communication got handy. One major drawback I faced when I adopted this reflective type of communication is I overthink a lot, procrastinate a lot. Overthinking is the major drawback on reflective type of communication. You tend to overthink a lot, that you stress more. You give more stress to your head. So that is what overthinking. And also I used to procrastinate a lot. I used to overthink in future. I used to think 2 years ahead when I adopted this type of communication. It gave me a very good lesson. Then I tend to realize I have to live in the present. So this is the major drawback of the reflective type of communication. But situation requires reflective type of communication, right? So that was a major drawback. When you overthink a lot, you give more stress to your head, and you tend to forget the present that is going on, moving on. So that's how in the next phases I developed a communication style that is right to my personality. That is nothing but an assertive type of communication style. This is the king of communication style. Assertive is a balanced of all communication style. All situation adapts to assertive communication. When I say assertive, that you are emotionally intelligent and try to communicate with others. For example, you tend to the quarrel between the two people, you tend to be resolver. That is what assertive communicator is. You resolve the situation by balancing two individuals and make sure they understand the situation that they are going, it is wrong, and make sure you will provide a good solution to that and solve that quarrel between the two individuals. So that's what assertive communication is. It's a most adaptable communication style that you can adopt. With respect to the situation, you tend to be an assertive communicator. That's what the true leaders adopt. That is what our assertive communication style. So my style is when I tend to go with assertive communication style. If the situation demands different communication style, I go with that. Just remember one thing. You have this hundreds of communication style. Anything can be suited to your personality. Anything you can select. But when it comes to the different situation, requires different communication style. I will tell you a good example. Sometimes the serious situations require a passive communication that is a good suited. Sometimes if you tends to become a weaker, you have to show your aggressiveness. Then in where you develop this aggressive communication style, that will be helpful. Sometimes you have to be very curious to come up in your careers, right? Then it comes the reflective communication that helps to balance all this. And you have to be a good great leader with a reasoning ability, and with a good negotiations and all those things skills. Then the assertive communication comes in. So just remember, different situation in life requires different communication styles. So hope you liked this video, and do comment on my video which is your communication style that you want to adopt. Thank you so much for this wonderful session. Hope you have a great night. Thank you. Stay tuned.